Your entire life, you were told that debt was something you chose. What if I told you that for millions of people, debt is something they were carefully guided toward long before they ever signed their first loan? Someone profits every time you confuse convenience with freedom. Someone wins every time you mistake a monthly payment for affordability. And the most dangerous trap is the one that feels completely normal. In this audiobook, we are going to pull back the curtain on one of the most invisible systems shaping modern life. Not to create fear, not to encourage anger, and certainly not to pretend that every bank is your enemy. Banks provide valuable services. Credit can be a powerful tool when it is understood. This journey is about learning the difference between using the system and being unconsciously used by it. Over the next chapters, you will discover why so many hardworking people stay financially exhausted despite earning more than previous generations ever imagined. You will understand how habits are engineered, how borrowing quietly becomes an identity, how interest changes the speed of your future, and how ordinary people can begin reclaiming control one decision at a time. This is educational, not financial advice. Every financial decision carries risk, and your circumstances are unique. But understanding how money moves through your life is one of the greatest investments you can ever make. Remember this sentence because it may change the way you look at every paycheck you ever receive. The most expensive prison is the one that pays you just enough to stay inside it. Stay with me, because the first door of that prison is one almost everyone walks through willingly. There is a quiet moment that happens every month in homes all over the world. A phone vibrates. A paycheck arrives. For a brief second, there is relief. Then the numbers begin disappearing. Rent, mortgage, car payment, insurance, subscriptions, credit card, utilities, another loan, groceries, a few unexpected expenses. Before the month has truly begun, the money already belongs to someone else. The strange part is that many people have accepted this rhythm as adulthood itself. They believe this endless cycle is simply what responsible living looks like. Work, pay, recover, repeat. Yet responsibility and dependency are not the same thing. Imagine standing beside a river carrying clean water. Instead of drinking directly from it, someone hands you a cup with a tiny hole in the bottom. Every few seconds, you must ask for another refill because your cup never stays full. Eventually, you stop questioning the cup. You only worry about getting another refill. That is how financial dependence often begins. Not with one terrible decision, not with recklessness, but with tiny leaks that slowly become permanent. Banks understand something about human psychology that many people never stop to consider. People rarely make decisions based on total cost. They make decisions based on immediate comfort. That single truth shapes entire industries. Walk into a dealership and notice what is emphasized. Not the total amount, the monthly payment. Browse online stores, not the lifetime cost, the installment. Listen to advertisements. Rarely do they ask whether something will improve your financial future. They ask whether you deserve it today. There is a reason. The human brain naturally values immediate rewards more than distant consequences. This tendency existed long before modern banking. It helped our ancestors survive. Choosing food today instead of waiting until tomorrow often meant staying alive. But in the modern financial world, that ancient instinct can quietly work against us. The system does not need you to be irresponsible. It only needs you to be impatient. there is a difference. Think about the first time someone offered you credit. Maybe it was a student loan, maybe a credit card, maybe financing for furniture, maybe a car. The conversation was rarely centered around future cash flow. Instead, it focused on possibility. You can have it now. You can enjoy it today. You can worry later. None of those statements are entirely false. That is what makes them powerful. The most convincing trap always contains a piece of truth. Credit itself is neither good nor evil. A hammer can build a home or break a window. The tool is not the problem. The relationship with the tool is everything. Unfortunately, very few people receive an education about that relationship. Schools spend years teaching equations, grammar, historical dates, and scientific principles. Many graduates can solve complicated mathematical problems but struggle to calculate how much interest compounds over 10 years. They understand photosynthesis but not cash flow. They memorize formulas but never learn why wealthy investors often ask different financial questions than ordinary consumers. That absence creates a vacuum, and every vacuum gets filled by someone. Advertising fills it, social pressure fills it, social media fills it, influencers fill it, financial institutions fill it. If education does not shape your beliefs about money, marketing certainly will. Look around your own life. How many purchases came from genuine need? How many came from comparison? Comparison has become one of the most profitable businesses in history. A stranger posts photographs from a luxury vacation. Another reveals a new car. Someone celebrates buying a larger home. Someone else displays expensive watches, designer clothing, exclusive restaurants, first-class flights. The images arrive instantly. Your brain compares instantly. The emotional pressure begins instantly. Yet you almost never see the monthly statements. You never see the anxiety at 3 in the morning. You never hear the arguments over bills. You never witness the sacrifices hidden behind the photographs. Comparison shows the reward. Debt often hides the cost. That is why financial freedom begins long before investing. It begins with emotional independence. When your emotions become predictable, your spending becomes predictable. When your spending becomes predictable, someone else can build entire business models around your behavior. That realization is uncomfortable. Not because it means someone controls you, but because it means many of your decisions may have been gently influenced without your awareness. Think about grocery stores. The products placed at eye level often receive the most attention. The music changes how quickly people move through aisles. The scent of fresh bread increases appetite. Nothing forces you to buy. The environment simply encourages certain behaviors. Financial systems work similarly. No one forces you to borrow, but incentives quietly surround every decision. Rewards, cashback, points, special financing, limited offers, 0% for a limited time, exclusive upgrades, pre-approved invitations. Each one feels harmless by itself. Together, they create momentum. Momentum is powerful because humans dislike interrupting it. Once spending becomes normal, saving begins to feel like deprivation. That emotional reversal changes everything. Saving should feel like protecting tomorrow. Instead, it begins feeling like denying today. Notice how subtle that shift is. Nobody announced it. Nobody voted for it. Nobody explained it. It simply became part of modern culture. And culture often influences behavior more deeply than logic. There was once an elderly craftsman who repaired clocks in a quiet neighborhood. People asked him why some clocks lasted for generations, while others constantly failed. He smiled and answered with unusual simplicity. The broken clocks never failed all at once. They drifted 1 second at a time. Financial lives rarely collapse overnight. They drift. One unnecessary payment, another subscription, another upgrade, another refinance, another impulse purchase, another balance carried into next month. Years later, people wonder where all their money disappeared. It disappeared the same way the clock lost time, 1 second at a time, one choice at a time, one unnoticed habit at a time. This is not about guilt. Guilt changes very little. Awareness changes everything. Because the moment you begin noticing invisible patterns, they slowly lose their invisible power. That is why this conversation matters. Not because banks are secretly controlling every aspect of life, but because systems naturally reward predictable behavior. If you become predictable, someone else can calculate your future. Real freedom begins the moment your future becomes harder to predict because your decisions begin coming from intention instead of habit. And intention is born from a question almost nobody asks. Who benefits most from the financial choices I make every ordinary day? That question may feel small, but before long, it will begin unraveling assumptions you have carried for years. And once those assumptions begin to loosen, another realization quietly steps into the room, waiting with remarkable patience, because the invisible trap is even older than the loans themselves. It begins with the story we are taught about what success is supposed to look like. And that story starts long before anyone ever hands us a credit card or a mortgage application. From childhood, many of us inherited a picture of success before we ever earned our first dollar. Study hard, find a stable job, work faithfully, buy a house, finance a reliable car, upgrade when your income grows, retire someday. There is nothing inherently wrong with any of those goals. Millions of people have built meaningful, honorable lives following that path. But there is a question that was almost never asked alongside it. Who designed the financial rules of that journey? Because every game has rules, and every set of rules quietly favors certain players. Imagine sitting down to play chess without realizing your opponent wrote the rule book. You might still win occasionally, but unless you understand how the game truly works, you will spend most of your energy reacting instead of creating strategy. That is how many people approach money. They become excellent workers, excellent employees, excellent professionals, yet they never become students of the system itself. The difference is enormous. A worker focuses on earning. A strategist focuses on keeping. A builder focuses on multiplying. And the wealthiest people often spend far more time thinking about the last two than the first. Think about your paycheck. Most people celebrate the amount. Very few celebrate the percentage they manage to preserve. That difference changes entire lives because income can disappear almost as quickly as it arrives. Habits remain. There are surgeons earning extraordinary salaries who quietly live paycheck to paycheck. There are school teachers with modest incomes who gradually build meaningful wealth over decades. Income matters. Behavior matters even more. The financial world often rewards consistency more generously than intensity. One wise investor once compared money to planting trees. Most people become fascinated by the fruit. Very few pay attention to the roots. The roots are invisible. Saving habits, patience, emotional discipline, learning, delayed gratification. Without strong roots, every season becomes dangerous. With strong roots, even difficult seasons eventually pass. Banks understand seasons remarkably well. They know recessions come, recoveries come, interest rates rise, interest rates fall, markets become optimistic, markets become fearful. Institutions prepare for cycles. Individuals often prepare only for today. That difference creates vulnerability. Think about emergencies. When someone has no financial cushion, every unexpected expense becomes urgent. A broken transmission, a medical bill, a leaking roof, a family emergency requiring travel. Suddenly borrowing no longer feels optional. It feels necessary. Notice something important. The loan itself was not created by the emergency. The emergency exposed the absence of preparation. That distinction matters because it shifts attention from blaming circumstances toward building resilience. Financial resilience is not about becoming rich overnight. It is about reducing the number of situations where desperation makes your decisions for you. Desperation is expensive. Calm is profitable. When people panic, they accept terms they would normally reject. They agree to higher interest, longer repayment periods, unnecessary fees, not because they are unintelligent, because stress shrinks perspective. Modern neuroscience has repeatedly shown that chronic financial stress changes how people think. The brain becomes increasingly focused on immediate survival rather than long-term planning. Tomorrow becomes blurry because today feels overwhelming. That is exactly why financial education cannot simply be about numbers. It must also be about emotions. Money decisions are rarely mathematical alone. They are emotional decisions wearing mathematical clothing. Consider a young couple buying their first home. The conversation is rarely only about square footage. It is about belonging, security, identity, children, family dinners, dreams. Those emotions are beautiful. But emotions can also make negotiations more difficult. When something becomes part of your identity, it becomes harder to question whether you can truly afford it. The same thing happens with cars. Few advertisements discuss transportation. They discuss status, adventure, confidence, achievement, freedom. The vehicle becomes a symbol rather than an object. The financing becomes secondary. That is not an accident. Humans naturally assign emotional meaning to possessions. Marketing simply amplifies what already exists inside us. There is an old saying that water always finds the lowest point. Money often follows attention in the same way. Where attention flows repeatedly, spending quietly follows. If your attention constantly rests on what others own, your spending begins chasing comparison. If your attention rests on building freedom, your spending begins serving purpose. Purpose is remarkably patient. Comparison is permanently impatient. That is why comparison is so profitable. It convinces you that someone else's timeline should become your emergency. Perhaps a colleague buys a luxury vehicle. Suddenly, your perfectly reliable car feels inadequate. Nothing about the car changed. Only the comparison changed. Perhaps your neighbor renovates an already beautiful kitchen. Now your own kitchen suddenly appears outdated. Nothing about the room changed. Only the stories surrounding it changed. Stories move markets. Stories move consumers. Stories move entire economies. The most powerful financial decisions are often made by the stories people believe about themselves. I deserve this. I'm behind. Everyone else has more. I'll catch up later. This payment isn't that much. I can always refinance. Each sentence seems harmless. Together, they create a financial identity. Identity shapes habits. Habits shape outcomes. Years shape destinies. There was once a woman who inherited a small family bakery after her parents retired. The business had survived for decades without expanding into a chain. Friends urged her to borrow heavily, open multiple locations immediately, and compete with larger brands. The offers were attractive. The projections looked exciting. She listened carefully, but chose something slower. She improved one location, strengthened operations, reduced waste, built loyal customers, saved cash, expanded only after each bakery consistently paid for itself. Many people called her overly cautious. 10 years later, several competitors who expanded rapidly had disappeared beneath overwhelming debt during an economic slowdown. Her bakeries remained open, not because growth was bad, because stability had been built before speed. That lesson reaches far beyond business. Speed magnifies whatever foundation already exists. If the foundation is strong, growth accelerates success. If the foundation is weak, growth accelerates problems. Debt works the same way. Used carefully, it can accelerate productive investments. Used carelessly, it accelerates financial fragility. The tool does not determine the outcome. Preparation does. That is why wealthy families often spend generations teaching children how money behaves before large sums of money ever reach them. Knowledge arrives before capital. Many ordinary households experience the opposite. Money arrives first. Education hopefully comes later. Sometimes it never comes at all. The result is predictable. People earn more, spend more, borrow more, worry more, then wonder why prosperity always seems just beyond reach. The invisible trap rarely announces itself with dramatic warnings. It whispers, "You can afford the payment, everyone finances things, life is short, treat yourself, upgrade now. Future, you will figure it out." Future you eventually becomes present you, and present you inherits every promise that past you made. One day you wake up and realize that your calendar is no longer organized around dreams. It is organized around due dates. That realization can feel discouraging, but it can also become the beginning of freedom, because awareness creates choice. Once you recognize the pattern, you no longer have to participate in it automatically. You begin asking different questions. Instead of asking, "Can I qualify?" you ask, "Does this move me closer to freedom?" Instead of asking, "What is the monthly payment?" you ask, "What is the total cost of this decision over the next 10 years?" Instead of asking, "What do other people think?" you ask, "What future am I quietly building?" Those questions seem simple, yet they separate people who merely earn money from people who gradually gain authority over it. And authority is different from ownership. Many people own expensive possessions. Very few own their financial peace. Financial peace cannot be purchased in a showroom. It cannot be delivered to your front door. It is built through thousands of quiet decisions nobody applauds. The fascinating thing is that the system does not fear people who earn more. It fears people who begin thinking differently. Because once your thinking changes, your behavior follows. And when your behavior changes consistently, the invisible machinery that once guided your choices begins losing its grip. That transformation begins with understanding one of the oldest forces in finance, a force so ordinary that most people stop noticing it completely, even though it quietly determines whether time becomes your greatest ally or your most relentless collector. There is a force so ordinary that most people stop noticing it after the first time they hear the word: interest. Not because it is complicated, Because it is familiar, and familiarity has a strange effect on the human mind. The things we see every day slowly disappear from our awareness. You stop noticing the sound of the refrigerator in your kitchen. You stop noticing the watch on your wrist. You stop noticing the route you drive to work. In the same way, millions of people stop noticing how interest quietly shapes the direction of their entire financial lives. Interest is not emotional. It does not celebrate with you when you receive a raise. It does not feel sympathy when life becomes difficult. It simply follows mathematics with extraordinary patience. That patience is what makes it so powerful. Imagine two travelers leaving the same city. The first walks only one extra step each day. The second stays exactly where he is. After a week, the difference is almost invisible. After a year, it becomes noticeable. After 20 years, they are living it in completely different places. Interest behaves in much the same way. Tiny percentages become enormous realities because time refuses to stop moving. Many people think the greatest financial advantage belongs to those who earn the highest salaries. But history repeatedly shows that time often defeats income. A person earning a modest income who consistently allows money to grow can quietly surpass someone earning 3 times as much who constantly pays interest instead of receiving it. The difference is not intelligence, it is direction. Money is always moving. The question is whether it is moving toward you or away from you. Every financial decision quietly answers that question. Think about a river. You do not need to fight the current every second if you understand where the current flows. You position your boat wisely. You use the water instead of exhausting yourself against it. Financial literacy works the same way. It teaches you to recognize currents before they carry you somewhere you never intended to go. One of the greatest misconceptions about debt is believing that every borrowed dollar costs exactly $1. It rarely does. A loan is never just today's purchase. It is tomorrow's commitment, next year's obligation, a future version of yourself signing an agreement you made months or years earlier. That future version cannot negotiate with the past. It can only honor it. There is something deeply humbling about that realization. Every decision introduces yourself to someone you have not yet become. Will that future person thank you, or quietly wish you had paused for one more day before saying yes? Very few advertisements encourage that conversation. Speed sells. Reflection rarely does. Notice how quickly modern life encourages action. One click, one tap, instant approval, immediate delivery, fast financing, same-day decisions. Convenience has become one of the defining achievements of our age. There is nothing wrong with convenience until convenience replaces consideration. Some of life's greatest mistakes happen at the speed of impulse. Some of life's greatest victories happen at the speed of patience. The wealthy often understand something surprisingly simple. Waiting is a financial skill, not because waiting feels good, because waiting separates emotion from judgment. Imagine walking through a beautiful shopping district after receiving unexpected good news. Perhaps you received a promotion, closed an important business deal, finished paying off a difficult obligation. Emotion is running high. Confidence feels unlimited. Everything suddenly appears affordable. Now imagine returning to those exact same stores 2 weeks later after the excitement has settled. You often discover that many of the things that felt essential now appear completely optional. Nothing changed except your emotional state. Yet your spending instincts changed dramatically. Banks understand timing. Retailers understand timing. Advertisers understand timing. Holiday sales arrive during seasons of celebration. Luxury campaigns appear when bonuses are distributed. Special financing often appears when emotions naturally run strongest. Again, none of this is sinister. It is business. The responsibility remains ours. Understanding influence is not the same as becoming its victim. It simply means becoming conscious. Conscious people are harder to manipulate. Not impossible, just harder. There is an old craftsman who once taught his apprentice how to carve wood. The apprentice believed strength came from striking harder with each swing. The master smiled and shook his head. He picked up the chisel and removed only the smallest pieces with calm precision. Hour after hour, day after day. Eventually, an extraordinary sculpture emerged. The apprentice finally understood. Mastery was never about force. It was about direction repeated consistently. Money obeys the same principle. Financial freedom is rarely built through dramatic moments. It is carved from ordinary days. The decision to save before spending. The decision to read instead of assuming. The decision to delay gratification. The decision to ask one more question before signing. Those moments appear insignificant. Compounded over years, they become life-changing. Unfortunately, compounding works both ways. Small wisdom compounds. Small neglect compounds too. A $5 daily habit may not feel important. Neither does a daily investment of $5. Given enough time, both become surprisingly large. The challenge is that the human brain struggles to respect slow consequences. We respond quickly to immediate pain. Touch a hot stove. You never forget. But financial consequences often arrive politely, months later, years later, long after the original excitement has disappeared. That delay creates a dangerous illusion. People assume there is no consequence simply because none arrived immediately. Nature teaches a different lesson. Plant an apple seed today, tomorrow nothing appears different. A month later, still very little. Years later, there is shade, fruit, and strength. The invisible work was happening the entire time. Debt grows roots the same way. So does wealth. Neither announces itself while it is quietly developing beneath the surface. That is why your daily habits matter more than your occasional victories. Many people believe financial freedom requires extraordinary discipline. In reality, it often requires extraordinary clarity. When you become clear about what truly matters, many unnecessary expenses quietly lose their emotional power. You stop buying to impress strangers. You stop upgrading simply because others have. You stop confusing appearance with achievement. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is permission to live below the expectations of people who are not responsible for your future. That sentence deserves a moment, because enormous amounts of debt exist for one simple reason. People spend money they have not yet earned to maintain an image they never truly wanted in the first place. Status has become one of the most expensive subscriptions in modern society. And unlike streaming services, it never stops asking for another payment. There will always be someone driving a newer car, living in a larger house, wearing a more expensive watch, taking a more luxurious vacation. If your peace depends on catching them, peace will always remain just beyond your reach. Comparison has no finish line. Purpose does. Purpose allows you to say, "This is enough for now." Those 5 words quietly terrify industries built upon endless dissatisfaction. Because a content person is difficult to pressure, a grateful person is difficult to manipulate. A financially educated person asks uncomfortable questions. Why am I buying this? Who benefits most from this purchase? What opportunity am I giving up by making this decision today? Opportunity cost is one of the most overlooked ideas in personal finance. Every dollar spent is also a dollar unavailable for something else. That reality sounds obvious. Yet, very few people feel it emotionally. Imagine standing at a train station. Every train you board automatically means you are not boarding another. Life works that way. Money works that way. Choosing one future quietly means declining another. The purchase itself is rarely the entire cost. The hidden cost is every future possibility that money might have created instead. That realization is not meant to make you fearful of spending. Life should be enjoyed. Experiences matter. Generosity matters. Celebration matters. Money is a servant, not a trophy. The goal is not to become someone who never spends. The goal is to become someone who spends intentionally. Because intentional spending creates intentional living, and intentional living slowly transforms into intentional freedom. The remarkable thing is that banks calculate numbers, but they also calculate behavior. They understand probabilities, patterns, repayment histories, risk profiles. Algorithms become increasingly accurate because human habits become increasingly predictable. But there is one kind of customer who consistently becomes difficult to predict. The person who learns, the person who questions, the person who refuses to let convenience replace wisdom. That person begins making decisions from principles instead of pressure. And once that transformation begins, another illusion starts falling apart. It is the illusion that earning more money automatically solves financial problems. Because for many people, a higher income becomes not the escape from the invisible trap, but the very thing that quietly tightens it even further. There is a strange moment that catches many people completely by surprise. They finally receive the promotion they dreamed about. The raise arrives. The salary increases. For a few weeks, life feels lighter. There is room to breathe. There is room to save. There is room to get ahead. Then something unexpected happens. The car is upgraded. The apartment becomes larger. Vacations become more expensive. Restaurants become more frequent. Subscriptions multiply. Furniture is replaced. Clothing quietly becomes more luxurious. Within a year, the higher income has disappeared into a higher standard of living. Nothing feels different, except the payments became larger. This pattern has a name: lifestyle inflation. It is one of the quietest traps in personal finance because it disguises itself as progress. After all, if you work harder and earn more, should your life not improve? Of course it should. The question is not whether your lifestyle should improve. The question is whether your obligations should grow faster than your freedom. Those are two very different things. Many people mistake increased consumption for increased wealth. But wealth is not measured by what enters your life. It is measured by what remains under your control. Imagine two neighbors. Both earn the same impressive income. One drives an expensive luxury vehicle, carries significant credit card balances, finances nearly every major purchase, and worries constantly about losing a single paycheck. The other drives a modest car that has long been paid for, quietly invests each month, keeps an emergency reserve, and sleeps peacefully at night. From the street, the first neighbor, appears wealthier. From the inside, the second is freer. Freedom has a curious habit of looking ordinary. It rarely demands attention. It rarely announces itself. It often lives in simple decisions repeated over many years. One of the greatest misunderstandings in modern culture is believing that financial success must always be visible. Real wealth often becomes quieter as it grows. Think about an oak tree. When it is young, nearly all of its energy is visible. Leaves, branches, rapid upward growth. As it matures, much of its strength develops beneath the surface. Its roots spread wider. Its stability increases. Storms that once threatened it become little more than passing weather. Financial maturity follows a similar path. Early on, people often focus on appearances. Later, they begin focusing on resilience. Resilience is difficult to photograph. No one posts a picture of an emergency fund. No one celebrates refusing an unnecessary purchase. No one receives applause for quietly investing instead of upgrading. Yet those invisible choices slowly create visible freedom. There is a lesson hidden inside nearly every economic downturn. When difficult seasons arrive, appearances lose much of their value. Liquidity matters. Flexibility matters. Low fixed expenses matter. Cash flow matters. People who spent years preparing quietly often appear remarkably calm, while everyone else wonders how they remain so steady. The answer is rarely luck. It is preparation that nobody noticed while the sun was shining. Banks prepare for uncertainty. Large companies prepare for uncertainty. Governments prepare for uncertainty. Yet many individuals organize their entire financial lives as though uncertainty will never arrive. That is not optimism. That is vulnerability. Hope is a wonderful emotion. It should never replace preparation. There is a beautiful difference between expecting good things and depending on perfect circumstances. Life has never promised perfect circumstances. Jobs change, industries evolve, technology replaces familiar careers. Unexpected illnesses appear, markets fluctuate, families grow, responsibilities shift. The question is never whether life will surprise you. The question is how expensive those surprises become. A financial cushion does something remarkable. It does more than protect money. It protects decision-making. Imagine two employees working in the same company. One has savings covering several months of expenses. The other is living paycheck to paycheck. Both experience an unethical situation at work. The first person has options. The second feels trapped. Notice what changed. Not intelligence, not courage, options. Money cannot buy integrity. But financial preparation often gives integrity room to breathe. Freedom frequently arrives disguised as options. The option to leave a toxic workplace. The option to start a business carefully instead of desperately. The option to help family members during difficult seasons. The option to say no without fearing immediate financial collapse. That is why building financial strength is about much more than accumulation. It is about expanding choice. Choice changes the way you walk through the world. There was an old sailor who spent decades navigating unpredictable oceans. Young captains constantly asked him the same question. How do you survive the storms? He always gave the same answer. You prepare before the clouds appear. Once the storm arrives, preparation is no longer possible. You simply discover whether you prepared well enough. Money behaves the same way. The emergency fund is built before the emergency. Insurance is chosen before disaster. Skills are developed before industries change. Relationships are strengthened before difficult seasons arrive. Preparation is quiet. Its rewards become loud only when life becomes difficult. One reason debt becomes so dangerous is that it quietly reduces future flexibility. Every monthly obligation narrows available choices. One payment alone may seem insignificant. Several together begin shaping your calendar, your career decisions, your emotional state, your willingness to take healthy risks. People sometimes believe debt only affects mathematics. It affects psychology just as deeply. When every month begins with pressure, creativity often shrinks. Vision becomes shorter. Attention becomes consumed by immediate obligations. Long-term opportunities become harder to recognize because the present demands constant attention. Imagine carrying a backpack. Place one book inside, hardly noticeable. Add another, still manageable. Keep adding books every week. Eventually, you forget how heavy the backpack has become because carrying it has become normal. Then one day someone removes it. You are shocked by how light your body suddenly feels. Many people experience the same sensation after eliminating long-standing debt. They expected relief. They did not expect the emotional silence, the absence of constant pressure, the disappearance of that quiet voice calculating bills in the background of every decision. That silence is valuable. It creates space for clearer thinking, for generosity, for creativity, for genuine enjoyment of life. The invisible trap is not simply financial, it is mental. The more obligations accumulate, the less attention remains available for possibility. This is why learning becomes such a powerful financial advantage. Knowledge expands options long before income does. A new skill, a better understanding of investing, negotiation, tax planning, business principles, communication, leadership. These assets cannot be repossessed. They travel wherever you go. Markets may rise and fall, employers may come and go, but what you truly understand becomes part of you. That is why some people recover quickly after financial setbacks. They did not merely lose money, they retained the knowledge that created it. Others inherit large fortunes only to lose them within years because the money arrived without the habits required to sustain it. Character protects wealth more reliably than income ever can. That sentence may be one of the least glamorous truths in finance. Character decides whether success becomes temporary or lasting. Patience, discipline, humility, curiosity, self-control. These qualities rarely appear on bank statements, yet they quietly determine many of the numbers written there. It is tempting to believe that one brilliant investment or one extraordinary opportunity changes everything. Occasionally, it does. Far more often, extraordinary lives are built by ordinary wisdom repeated for decades. A small investment every month, living below your means, avoiding unnecessary debt, continuing to learn, remaining patient while others chase shortcuts. There is nothing dramatic about these habits. That is precisely why so many people overlook them. Human beings are naturally attracted to excitement. Financial freedom is usually built through consistency. Consistency rarely goes viral, but it changes lives. If this conversation is helping you see money through a different lens, consider subscribing so these ideas continue becoming part of your daily thinking. The people around you may never notice the quiet shifts happening inside your mind, but years from now, your future self almost certainly will. One decision, then another, then another. Eventually, the direction of an entire life changes. Not because of luck, not because of secret formulas, but because invisible habits slowly replaced invisible traps. And perhaps the greatest invisible habit of all begins with a question that almost nobody asks when they walk into a bank, apply for a loan, or accept a new financial product. If this decision creates comfort today, what exactly will it quietly cost the version of me who wakes up 10 years from now? 10 years is a strange distance. It feels unimaginably far away when you are 20, comfortably distant when you are 30, suddenly close when you are 40, and astonishingly near when you are 60. Time has one habit that never changes. It keeps moving whether you prepare for it or not. That is why nearly every financial decision is actually a conversation across time. The person making today's choice and the person living with tomorrow's consequences are the same human being. The tragedy is that they rarely feel connected. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating. When people are shown aged images of themselves, they often become more willing to save money for retirement. They begin making wiser long-term decisions because the future version of themselves suddenly feels real instead of abstract. That tells us something profound. Most people are not intentionally harming their future. They simply struggle to emotionally recognize that future as themselves. Think about that for a moment. If an elderly stranger walked up to you today and quietly asked for help, many people would gladly offer kindness. But when that same elderly person is actually your future self, hidden decades ahead, it becomes surprisingly easy to ignore them. Every unnecessary debt quietly asks tomorrow's version of you to work a little longer. Every thoughtful investment quietly sends tomorrow's version of you a gift. Your future is constantly receiving packages from your present. Some contain freedom. Others contain obligations. You decide which ones get shipped. Banks understand something else about time. The longer money remains borrowed, the longer it continues working for the lender. Again, there is nothing immoral about this. That is the business model. Banks gather deposits. They lend capital. They manage risk. They earn through interest and financial services. The important lesson is not to resent that reality. It is to understand it well enough that you stop participating unconsciously. Knowledge transforms relationships. A person who understands electricity uses it safely. A person who understands nutrition eats differently. A person who understands finance begins asking different questions before signing agreements. Questions create protection. Never be embarrassed to ask them. What is the total repayment amount? How much interest will I pay if I keep this loan for its full term? What happens if I lose my income for 6 months? What fees are hidden inside this agreement? Can I comfortably afford this if life becomes harder instead of easier? These questions rarely appear in advertisements, yet they may save years of unnecessary stress. There is an old carpenter who was famous throughout his town for building homes that lasted generations. One apprentice noticed that before placing a single beam, the carpenter spent days simply walking around the empty land, measuring, watching the sunlight, studying the soil, observing how water flowed after rain. Finally, the apprentice asked why so much time was spent doing nothing. The carpenter smiled. I am not doing nothing. I am deciding where future problems will not exist. That answer contains extraordinary financial wisdom. Most people spend more time researching a television than understanding a 30-year mortgage. More time comparing smartphones than comparing investment fees. More time choosing a vacation than planning financial independence. The consequence is predictable. Minor purchases receive major attention. Major financial commitments receive emotional decisions. Reverse that pattern and your life begins changing quietly. There is another invisible trap that deserves attention: minimum payments. Few phrases sound more harmless. Pay the minimum. Stay current. Everything appears under control. Yet minimum payments often create maximum timelines. They stretch small obligations across years. Interest quietly continues its patient work. Progress becomes almost invisible. Imagine climbing a mountain where every 10 steps forward, you automatically slide back 8. Technically, you are still advancing, but the journey becomes dramatically longer. Many financial products are designed around exactly that principle: movement without meaningful progress. That is why paying only the minimum can become psychologically dangerous. It creates the comforting illusion that everything is improving while very little actually changes. The numbers move. Freedom barely does. There is a deeper issue beneath all of this. Many people confuse access with ownership. Having access to something does not mean you own it. Driving an expensive financed car may create the appearance of ownership, yet the obligation attached to it may quietly own part of your future income. Living in a beautiful home, purchased responsibly, can be a wonderful investment. Living in a home whose payments dominate every financial decision can quietly transform the owner into someone serving the house instead of the house serving the family. Ownership is not merely possessing an asset. Ownership is possessing it without surrendering your peace. Peace has tremendous economic value. A peaceful mind negotiates better, learns faster, builds healthier relationships, recognizes opportunities, makes wiser decisions. Stress narrows vision. Peace expands it. This is why true financial education reaches beyond spreadsheets. It becomes a way of thinking, a way of observing, a way of refusing to let emotion permanently outrank reason. Consider the people who seem financially calm regardless of economic headlines. Interest rates rise, markets fall, inflation increases, recessions appear, yet they remain remarkably steady. It is not because they know the future. It is because they prepared for uncertainty instead of certainty. There is enormous wisdom in expecting life to remain unpredictable. Unexpected events stop feeling like personal attacks. They become part of reality. Preparation becomes normal instead of optional. That mindset changes everything. You begin building margins instead of living on edges. Margins in your schedule, margins in your finances, margins in your emotional life. A life with no margin becomes fragile. One unexpected expense creates panic. One delayed paycheck creates crisis. One broken appliance creates borrowing. One emergency becomes another loan. Margins interrupt that chain reaction. The invisible trap depends upon urgency. Urgency weakens negotiation. Urgency weakens patience. Urgency weakens judgment. Remove urgency, and many expensive decisions disappear before they are ever made. There is something deeply empowering about realizing that your greatest financial advantage may not be earning another $1,000 this month. It may be reducing the number of desperate decisions you will ever need to make. That idea rarely receives attention, yet it changes lives. Every dollar that creates breathing room is doing more than sitting in an account. It is purchasing flexibility. Every skill that increases your value is doing more than improving your resume. It is reducing dependence. Every debt eliminated is doing more than improving your balance sheet. It is giving your future choices more room to exist. Freedom is rarely one giant breakthrough. Freedom is accumulated space. Space to think, space to choose, space to recover, space to build, space to become. And once you begin valuing that space, something remarkable happens. You stop asking, "How much can I borrow?" You begin asking, "How little do I actually need?" That question is far more powerful than it first appears, because the person who needs less cannot be controlled as easily as the person who always needs more. Contentment is not the enemy of ambition. It is the foundation that keeps ambition from becoming desperation. You can still dream boldly, build businesses, invest wisely, create wealth, support your family, travel the world. The difference is that your dreams become powered by intention instead of endless consumption. That subtle shift is where genuine financial independence begins. Because the strongest position in any negotiation belongs to the person who can calmly walk away. And that ability rarely arrives through luck. It is quietly built through years of choices that no one applauds while you are making them. Those choices may seem ordinary today. Years from now, they may become the reason your children inherit opportunities instead of obligations. And that is where the invisible trap finally begins to lose its power. Because the greatest wealth you can leave behind is not simply money, but a completely different way of thinking about it. Every family passes down something. Sometimes it is a house. Sometimes it is a business. Sometimes it is a collection of photographs, recipes, or traditions. But every family also passes down beliefs. Beliefs about work. Beliefs about success. Beliefs about money. Those invisible inheritances often shape our lives far more than the visible ones. A child who grows up hearing that money always disappears begins to expect loss. A child who constantly hears that wealthy people must be dishonest may unconsciously sabotage every opportunity to build wealth. A child who watches parents argue about bills may carry anxiety into every financial decision as an adult, even after becoming financially secure. The numbers change, the emotional patterns often remain. That is why breaking the invisible trap requires more than earning more. Sometimes it requires questioning ideas that have lived quietly inside your mind for decades, not because your parents intended to limit you. Most parents teach what they themselves were taught. They pass along experience. Sometimes experience contains wisdom. Sometimes it contains fear. Both can feel equally convincing. There was a father who spent 30 years working at the same factory. He was dependable, respected, never missed a shift unless illness forced him to stay home. His greatest dream was simple. He wanted his children to have easier lives than he had. One evening, his daughter asked why he never started the small repair business everyone knew he was capable of building. He smiled gently. People like us don't do things like that. It was not bitterness. It was belief. Those 7 words quietly carried generations of limitation. People like us. How many dreams have disappeared inside that sentence? People like us don't invest. People like us don't own businesses. People like us don't negotiate salaries. People like us don't become financially independent. Notice how identity quietly becomes destiny. When people believe something belongs to another kind of person, they stop pursuing it long before failure ever has a chance to teach them anything. The invisible trap is not only external. Sometimes it lives inside language itself. The stories we repeat, become the boundaries we rarely question. This is why financial education is so powerful. It introduces new stories. Stories of ordinary people who built extraordinary stability through patience instead of luck. Stories of immigrants who arrived with almost nothing but gradually created businesses that supported entire families. Stories of teachers who invested consistently for decades. Stories of mechanics, nurses, engineers, artists, carpenters, and entrepreneurs who discovered that wealth is less about occupation than about behavior. Those stories matter because they expand identity. They quietly whisper a new possibility. Maybe people like me can do this too. That single thought has changed countless lives. Banks understand statistics. They understand probability. They know approximately how people with certain spending habits, credit histories, and income levels are likely to behave. Statistics are useful, but you are not obligated to become your own statistical prediction. You can interrupt the pattern. Every time you choose learning over impulse, every time you save before spending, every time you invest in knowledge instead of appearance, every time you refuse to borrow simply because everyone else says it is normal, patterns begin changing. One decision seems insignificant. 10,000 decisions create a completely different life. Think about language for a moment. People often say they have to go to work, have to pay bills, have to make payments, have to stay in the job. Listen carefully. Those words describe obligation. Now compare them with different language. I choose this work because it supports my long-term vision. I choose to spend less today because I value freedom tomorrow. I choose to build skills because they increase my options. The circumstances may initially appear identical. The mindset is completely different. Choice restores dignity. Victimhood quietly removes it. This does not mean every circumstance is fair. Far from it. Many people begin life facing obstacles others never encounter. Economic inequality exists. Unexpected hardships exist. Discrimination exists. Illness exists. No serious conversation about money should pretend otherwise. Yet within those realities remains another truth. Your response to circumstances still shapes possibilities. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently. History is filled with people who began with profound disadvantages and gradually built remarkable lives because they refused to surrender responsibility for the decisions that remained within their control. Responsibility is often misunderstood. It is not accepting blame for everything. It is accepting ownership of your next decision. That distinction changes everything. Perhaps you inherited debt. You are not responsible for how it arrived. You are responsible for what happens next. Perhaps no one ever taught you how investing works. You are not responsible for that absence. You are responsible for whether you continue living without learning. Perhaps you made painful financial mistakes. Almost everyone has. Some purchased homes they could not comfortably afford. Some accumulated overwhelming credit card balances. Some trusted the wrong business partner. Some chased impossible investment promises. Mistakes are expensive. Ignoring their lessons is even more expensive. One honest lesson can repay years of regret. There is an old Japanese art called kintsugi. When a ceramic bowl breaks, the cracks are repaired with lacquer mixed with precious metals. Instead of hiding the fractures, they become part of the object's beauty. The bowl is not valuable because it never broke. It is valuable because it was restored with wisdom. Financial lives can be repaired the same way. The goal is not pretending mistakes never happened, The goal is allowing those mistakes to create stronger judgment than you possessed before. Many financially successful people carry stories they rarely discuss. Businesses that failed, investments that collapsed, years of overwhelming debt, embarrassing financial decisions. They are not successful because they never stumbled. They became successful because they refused to let one chapter become the entire story. That is an important distinction. Debt can become a chapter. It should never become your identity. Poor decisions can become a chapter. They should never become your identity. Temporary struggle can become a chapter. It should never become your identity. Identity is powerful because people naturally behave in ways that match how they see themselves. Someone who says, "I am terrible with money," often continues proving themselves correct. Someone who quietly begins saying, "I am becoming financially disciplined," starts noticing opportunities to behave differently. The sentence is small. The transformation can be enormous. Your brain constantly searches for evidence supporting whatever identity you repeat most often. Choose those identities carefully. There is another belief that deserves to be challenged. Many people believe wealth is built through extraordinary intelligence. Certainly, intelligence helps. But observation reveals something else. Consistency repeatedly outperforms brilliance without discipline. A brilliant person who cannot delay gratification often struggles. An ordinary person with exceptional consistency quietly advances year after year. Think of water dripping onto stone. One drop appears powerless. Another seems equally insignificant. Thousands of drops reshape the rock itself. Consistency has always possessed a quiet strength that dramatic action rarely sustains. That is encouraging, because consistency belongs to almost everyone willing to practice it. You do not need extraordinary luck to read one book each month. You do not need genius to save a percentage of every paycheck. You do not need perfect timing to avoid unnecessary debt. You do not need celebrity status to teach your children healthy financial habits. These actions appear almost invisible while you perform them. Years later, they become unmistakable. One day, someone may ask how your family escaped the endless cycle that trapped previous generations. They may expect a dramatic answer, a lucky investment, an inheritance, a secret strategy. The truth will probably sound much simpler. We changed the way we thought. Then we changed the way we acted. Then we repeated those actions long enough that our future finally began looking different from our past. That is how invisible traps lose. Not through outrage, not through blame, through awareness followed by patient action. Because the most powerful financial revolution rarely begins inside banks or governments. It begins quietly in someone's kitchen, at someone's dining table, during an honest conversation between parents and children, during the moment someone chooses to explain not only how to earn money, but how to respect it. That conversation may never trend online. It may never become famous. Yet, generations from now, its impact could still be quietly growing, long after everyone involved has forgotten the evening when the first new belief was spoken aloud. There is a quiet ritual that happens in many homes without anyone calling it a lesson. A child watches a parent open the mailbox. The parent sighs before looking at the bills. The child notices. Nothing is explained. Yet something is learned. Years later, that same child may experience anxiety every time they check their own bank account without fully understanding why. Money has always been emotional, before it becomes mathematical. That is why the invisible trap survives from one generation to the next. It is taught silently, through habits, through reactions, through conversations overheard late at night, through worries whispered when children are believed to be asleep. If we truly want financial freedom, we cannot simply change our bank balance. We must change our relationship with money itself. Relationships are built on trust, and trust grows through understanding. Imagine meeting someone who only appeared when they wanted something from you. Eventually, you would become cautious. Now imagine someone who appeared consistently, behaved predictably, and honored every promise they made. Trust would naturally grow. Treat your money the same way. Become someone your own future can trust. Save what you promise to save. Invest what you promise to invest. Spend where you promise to spend. Keep small promises to yourself until they become part of your character. Character is simply repeated behavior that no longer requires applause. Many people wait until they have more money before becoming disciplined. They have the sequence backwards. Discipline usually arrives first. Money often follows. Consider someone who cannot manage $1,000 wisely. Would $10,000 automatically solve the problem? Probably not. The habits remain, the numbers merely become larger. This is why sudden wealth often disappears surprisingly quickly. Lottery winners, professional athletes, entertainers, entrepreneurs after unexpected success. History contains countless examples of fortunes built rapidly and lost even faster. The money changed overnight. The mindset did not. True wealth grows best when identity grows alongside it. One supports the other. Without that balance, success becomes difficult to sustain. There is an exercise that may feel surprisingly uncomfortable. Picture yourself at 80 years old, not the version of yourself you hope exists, the version created by the financial habits you practice today. What kind of home are you living in? How much freedom do you have? Can you choose how to spend your days? Do you wake with peace or worry? Can you help those you love without fear? Can you say yes when your grandchildren ask you to join them on a trip? Or does every decision begin with the same sentence, "I wish I could afford it"? That future is not decided by one extraordinary event. It is shaped by ordinary Tuesdays, ordinary Wednesdays, ordinary mornings when nobody is watching. Life changes quietly before it changes visibly. A tree does not suddenly become tall. A river does not suddenly carve a canyon. A musician does not suddenly master an instrument. Years of invisible progress eventually become impossible to ignore. Financial freedom follows the same rhythm. There is another misunderstanding worth exploring. Many people think budgeting restricts life. They picture endless sacrifice, constant denial, the inability to enjoy what they have earned. But a healthy budget is not a prison. It is a map. Imagine beginning a journey across unfamiliar mountains without any map. Every wrong turn costs time, energy, resources. Now imagine having a reliable guide showing where the dangerous roads lead and where the safest paths begin. The map does not remove freedom. It creates it. A budget tells your money where to go before someone else decides for you. Without intention, every dollar becomes vulnerable to impulse. With intention, every dollar receives purpose. Purpose transforms spending. Instead of asking whether you can afford something, you begin asking whether it deserves a place in your future. That is a more difficult question. It is also a more rewarding one. Banks study cash flow because cash flow predicts stability. You should study your own cash flow for exactly the same reason, not to judge yourself. To understand yourself, awareness is never punishment, it is preparation. Spend 1 month honestly observing where every dollar goes, not estimating, not guessing, observing. The experience surprises almost everyone. Small expenses rarely feel significant in isolation. Together they often reveal patterns that had remained invisible for years. A coffee here, a delivery fee there, unused subscriptions, impulse purchases during stressful weeks. None of them are catastrophic. Together, they quietly compete against your future. The goal is not perfection. Perfection is exhausting. The goal is alignment. Does your spending align with the life you claim to want? That single question removes enormous confusion. If freedom matters, your spending should gradually reflect freedom. If family matters, your spending should increasingly strengthen family. If health matters, your spending should support health. Money is simply attention made visible. Where your money consistently goes often reveals what your heart truly prioritizes. Sometimes that realization is encouraging. Sometimes it is uncomfortable. Either way, it is useful. One of the most dangerous words in personal finance is someday. Someday I'll start investing. Someday I'll build an emergency fund. Someday I'll learn how taxes work. Someday I'll read about retirement planning. Someday quietly becomes years. Years quietly become decades. Then one morning, people wonder how time disappeared so quickly. Time never disappeared. It simply kept moving while decisions remained postponed. There is wisdom in beginning before you feel completely ready. Not recklessly, not carelessly, simply honestly. The first investment may be small. The first savings account may contain very little. The first financial book may feel confusing. The first budget may be imperfect. None of that matters. Motion creates clarity. Waiting for perfect confidence often creates permanent delay. There was once a gardener whose neighbors laughed because he planted tiny fruit trees while everyone else filled their yards with decorative flowers. The flowers bloomed immediately. His trees looked unimpressive. For several years, nothing appeared equal. Visitors admired the colorful gardens. Few noticed the small orchard. Then time performed its quiet miracle. The flowers continued blooming for a season before fading. The trees began producing fruit, then more fruit, then shade, then seeds for future generations. Patience eventually became visible. Money rewards patience in much the same way. The world celebrates immediate beauty. Life quietly rewards lasting value. As you continue this journey, I want you to remember something that has been present beneath every chapter we have explored. This audiobook has never been about fearing banks. Fear clouds judgment. Understanding sharpens it. Banks will continue doing what banks were created to do. Businesses will continue trying to sell products. Advertisers will continue competing for your attention. None of those realities automatically determine your future. Your habits do. Your awareness does. Your decisions do. That realization should never feel heavy. It should feel liberating because it returns something incredibly valuable to your hands. Responsibility. And responsibility is another word for influence. The moment you accept that your daily choices influence your financial destiny more than your excuses ever will, you quietly become someone the invisible trap can no longer easily predict. You stop drifting. You begin steering. And once you begin steering, even slowly, the destination itself begins changing long before anyone else can see it. One of the greatest myths about financial freedom is that it arrives all at once. People imagine a single life-changing event, the perfect investment, a massive inheritance, a business that suddenly explodes with success, a winning lottery ticket. Those stories capture attention because they are dramatic. Real life is usually much quieter. Freedom often arrives so gradually that you almost miss the moment it begins. The first month, you no longer worry about an unexpected bill. The first time you pay cash for something that once required financing. The first vacation you enjoy without returning home to credit card statements. The first morning you realize your investments earned money while you slept. The first conversation where someone pressures you into buying something unnecessary, and for the first time you feel absolutely nothing. No anxiety, no fear of missing out, no desire to impress, just peace. Peace is an extraordinary form of wealth. It cannot be purchased directly. It must be built. And the fascinating thing about peace is that it grows in the same place where discipline grows. Inside ordinary choices, many people believe discipline is restrictive. But discipline is simply remembering what you want most when temptation offers what you want now. That definition changes everything. Suppose someone places two doors in front of you. One door opens immediately. Inside are excitement, comfort, recognition, and instant gratification. The other door remains locked for years. No applause, no admiration, no immediate reward, only patient effort. Most people instinctively reach for the first door, not because they are foolish, because the human brain naturally values certainty today over possibility tomorrow. Yet behind the second door waits something the first can never provide. Ownership, not ownership of possessions, ownership of yourself, ownership of your time, ownership of your decisions, ownership of your future. That is what financial independence truly offers, the ability to choose instead of merely react. There was once a sculptor who spent months carving a single block of marble. Visitors stopped by every day. At first they laughed. It still looked like an ordinary stone. Weeks passed. Very little appeared different. One visitor finally asked, "How do you stay motivated when nothing seems to be changing?" The sculptor gently brushed marble dust from his hands. "Everything is changing. You simply cannot see it yet." That answer belongs in every conversation about money. You cannot always see your financial progress immediately. The emergency fund may seem painfully small. Investments may appear insignificant. Debt may disappear slower than you hoped. Skills may develop gradually. But invisible progress is still progress. Never confuse invisible with non-existent. Roots grow before branches. Strength develops before confidence. Wisdom arrives before abundance. That sequence has remained remarkably consistent throughout history. Think about every person you admire for their financial stability. If you look closely enough, you will usually discover years that nobody noticed. Years of restraint, years of learning, years of saying no when saying yes would have been easier. Years of quietly choosing long-term freedom over short-term appearance. Those years rarely become headlines, yet they create lives that others eventually admire. Comparison often causes people to skip those invisible years. Social media has accelerated this temptation. You open an app and instantly see success. Luxury homes, expensive vacations, designer clothing, business victories, investment gains. What you rarely see are the years before those photographs, the sacrifices, the failures, the uncertainty, the evenings spent studying while friends were entertained, the weekend spent building something instead of buying something. Comparison edits out process and leaves only results. That makes ordinary progress feel inadequate. Never compare your everyday reality with someone else's carefully edited highlight reel. It is one of the fastest ways to become financially impatient. Impatience has always been expensive. Patience has always been underrated. There is another quiet shift that happens as people become financially wiser. Their definition of luxury changes. At first, luxury means expensive things. Later, it becomes expensive experiences. Eventually, it becomes something entirely different. Luxury becomes waking up without financial panic. Luxury becomes spending uninterrupted time with family. Luxury becomes declining work that violates your values because you are no longer desperate. Luxury becomes helping someone without expecting repayment. Luxury becomes sleeping deeply because tomorrow's bills no longer haunt tonight's thoughts. That is the kind of wealth no brand can manufacture. No advertisement can package it. No lender can finance it. It must be earned through thousands of private decisions. One day, someone may ask you what changed. They may notice you seem calmer, less reactive, more intentional. Perhaps they assume your income doubled. Perhaps they believe you discovered a secret investment. The truth may be beautifully simple. You stopped allowing money to control your emotions. Instead, you learned to let your values guide your money. Values create stability. Emotions create movement. Both matter. But when emotions permanently lead, financial life often becomes unpredictable. When values lead, emotions eventually become calmer, too. This is why every purchase deserves one quiet question. Does this reflect the person I am becoming? Not the person others expect. Not the person advertisements describe. Not the person comparison demands. The person you genuinely wish to become. That question changes shopping into reflection, borrowing into responsibility, saving into self-respect, investing into hope. Hope is important, not blind hope, prepared hope. Hope supported by action, hope strengthened by consistency. Hope that wakes each morning ready to participate in its own future. There is tremendous dignity in that kind of hope. It does not wait for rescue. It prepares for opportunity. Banks cannot predict hope like that. Algorithms struggle to measure discipline. Statistics cannot fully capture determination. Once a person becomes intentional, they become increasingly difficult to classify. The invisible trap depends upon automatic behavior. Intentional living quietly interrupts automation. You begin noticing marketing instead of absorbing it. You recognize emotional spending before acting on it. You pause, you breathe, you ask better questions. That pause may only last 30 seconds. It can save years of unnecessary obligations. Never underestimate the financial value of a thoughtful pause. Some of the most expensive decisions in life are made in moments that last less than 5 minutes. Some of the wisest decisions begin with one simple sentence. Let me think about it. Those words have protected countless futures. No pressure, no urgency, no emotional momentum, just space. Space is one of the rarest resources in modern life. Protect it carefully, because the quality of your decisions often depends upon the amount of space surrounding them. As this journey continues, another truth begins emerging from beneath everything we have discussed. The greatest financial advantage is not simply knowing how money works. It is knowing how your own mind works when money enters the conversation. Because Once you understand your own patterns, your own fears, your own habits, and your own emotional triggers, you stop fighting invisible enemies. You begin leading yourself. And self-leadership is the kind of wealth that continues paying dividends long after every paycheck has been spent. There is a question that quietly separates people who spend their lives chasing money from those who eventually make money serve their lives. What is enough? It sounds like a simple question. It is one of the most difficult questions any human being will ever answer, because the world rarely encourages enough. It encourages more, a little larger, a little newer, a little faster, a little more exclusive. There is always another level, another upgrade, another comparison, another promise that satisfaction waits just beyond the next purchase. Yet history tells a different story. Entire civilizations have accumulated extraordinary wealth while still struggling with dissatisfaction. Successful executives have earned fortunes while sacrificing health. Entrepreneurs have built remarkable companies only to discover they no longer recognize their own families. Celebrities surrounded by luxury have quietly admitted feeling profoundly empty. Money solved many problems. It could not answer the question of enough. That question belongs to you. No bank can answer it. No financial advisor can answer it. No influencer can answer it. Only you can decide what kind of life is worth building. That decision quietly shapes every financial choice that follows. Suppose two people each receive an unexpected $1 million. The first immediately begins expanding every area of life. Larger house, more expensive lifestyle, greater obligations, higher monthly costs. Within years, the fortune begins disappearing beneath a mountain of new expenses. Ahead of you is another path, long, unwritten, waiting. You cannot walk backward into a better future. You can only take the next step forward with greater wisdom than the step before. That is enough. You do not need to fix your entire financial life today. You only need to make today's decision slightly wiser than yesterday's. Then do the same tomorrow and the day after that. Those days become months. Those months become years. Those years become a legacy. A legacy measured not only by the money you leave behind, but by the freedom you create for everyone who walks after you. So whenever you are faced with another financial decision, whether it is large or small, pause for just a moment and ask yourself 4 simple questions. Will this bring me closer to freedom? Will my future self thank me for this? Am I buying value or simply chasing appearance? And does this decision reflect the person I want to become? If you answer those questions honestly, you will make fewer decisions you regret. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become wiser. And wisdom, patiently practiced, has always been the greatest form of wealth. Thank you for sharing this journey. May your future be built with intention. May your choices be guided by clarity instead of pressure. May your money become a tool rather than a burden. May your work create opportunity instead of endless obligation. And may you never forget the quiet truth that started this entire conversation. Banks may understand how money works, but once you understand how your own mind works, you begin building something far more valuable than money alone. You begin building a life that truly belongs to you.